Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast, Play, Learn, Lead ECE Voices of NL. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Sonia. And this month we're going to talk about inclusive practice with our guest, Ruby. Hi, Ruby.
Hi, my name is Ruby. I'm an ECE of over 20 years now. I'm a level four. I'm currently an administrator at a nonprofit center in St. John's. I do have strong interest in inclusion, both professionally and personally. I have children, two children, and they have diagnosis of Down syndrome, autism, ADHD, and OCD, along with some other things we're still figuring out. So inclusion is certainly a big part of my life, and I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you for sharing that with us as well. Um, Before we start, I just want to make a little disclaimer for anybody who's viewing this in the future, anytime after it has been recorded, or from another province or a different country. Just to be aware that some information may be different for you. It may have changed due to continuous adaptations within the inclusion program in Newfoundland, or you could be under a different um, program as well, wherever you may be finding yourself. Um, so, two main topics that we're going to be discussing today are universal design and then basically what the work of a staff member or a team of staff members looks like in the childcare setting. Um, so one of the things that is really important within universal design is equitable use. And I know for myself, every time I was ever taught about equity, it was you saw that little image of the three people looking over the fence, and they all had a different height of step stool that they were using. And that was basically the picture of equity. Um, but in one of our recent episodes for social contribution, we learned a beautiful analogy, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was about the equity with plants and the fact that, some plants need way more water or way less water, way more light, way less light than others. And whatever it is that we need on an individual basis that to make us thrive is what equity is. It's not um giving everybody the same thing. For example, I recently introduced plants to my classroom, and we have 10 plants that are the same type of plant, but some are hanging in the locker area where there's no natural light. Some are hanging directly in front of a window where there's so much sunlight. Um, so even though they're the same, they're they're kind of in different environments, right? So
Mhm.
the one that gets no natural light, it can hold on to its water a little longer than the one who gets sunlight every single day. So that plant needs to be watered more. Just like a child who's in a very stimulating environment, if we're talking about inclusive practice for just emotional well-being, really,
Mhm.
they they may need a lot more support with their regulation. Whereas a child who's in a calm environment, they may be able to regulate perfectly fine just by themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So I just thought that was a really beautiful analogy of what equity looks like and
Yeah, that's true.
showing, yeah,
Yeah, and it goes to show like the impact of the environment on a child, right?
yeah,
Like we're all accessing the same environment, but how it has individual impacts on each person is
Yeah.
different. And then depending on the day, the lighting, the amount of water, all those sorts of things, it's, it impacts everybody differently. And the equity in it is that, you know what, you have the water there that's needed for for the plant when it's needed. So you have the things within the environment available
Yeah.
and accessible for the children so that whatever they need, it's already there for them,
And it's
right?
kind of like, with plants, you're checking in on the plants. You're checking to see if their needs are being met, if they're too dry, if they're too wet, if they're wilting, if they're not thriving the same, then you adapt. So it's just like with our children, we're doing our observations, we're checking to make sure everything is going well, that they're developing how we would expect them to develop, and that's not the same for every child, right? Based on their needs, their abilities. And I just think that it's such an important thing to think about
Yep.
that. But when we think about universal design, and you had mentioned, making sure it's available, right? So universal design, as we know, is being proactive. It's having the things that could be needed, not necessarily always needed, but having the things that could be needed readily available and having them make sense.
Yep, for sure. And it's all about, I mean, like I said, all those things are in the same environment, but when you need to access them is going to vary from child to child and time to time. But by being proactive and having your environment set up so that it can be used equitably by all children and that it works well for all children,
Mhm.
then you're going to meet them where they are and help them thrive further.
Yeah. And just making sure too that it's not going to give us stress to make those things available, right?
Mhm.
Like you said, one keyword you used was readily available. Because if it takes us too much effort to adapt in situations, one, we're going to get stressed. Two, the children are going to feed off of that stress. They're going to feel our stress. And when that happens, it's so hard to get back on track.
Mhm.
Yep.
And you got a whole new kettle of fish. I don't even know what that means, but you know, it's just,
I
But
think
you're not
also oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you're not having to be reactive, right? So you're not always trying to
yes.
change something, trying to find a new
Yeah.
accommodation. It's already ingrained in your program so that those things are there, so that you're
Yeah.
able to, accept access them, or the children can access them very easily, right? Like you said there, I think you had mentioned before, like it's simple. The children know where they are. They know how to access them.
Yeah.
They know understand what it means. They know how like I just lost my train of thought then. Um, they can find it and they can know how to use it and they know that it's how to access what they need.
Right. And a big part of it too is having expectations and boundaries put in place and staying consistent with those as well. Um, and one big part I find of inclusive practice is making sure that all the staff in the room are on the same page. Because, for example, I don't I have a gross motor area in my classroom, and sometimes you'll have staff come in who aren't familiar with the room, um, and the expectations. And they it's scary to run a room with a gross motor area if you're not used to it because it's unfamiliar, right? So I feel that, um, yeah, I don't even know where I was going with this. Brain is going gobbledygook. Um, but yeah, consistency is just very important amongst staff. And it's really funny because the children in my room, if they have a staff come in that they're not particularly used to, that is not always in the room, at least once a week or whatnot, um, they can tell you what the expectations and the rules are.
Yeah, they really can.
Yeah, and if a staff is like, "Oh no, we can't do that." They're like, "No, but we are allowed to do that as long as we are doing it safely."
Yeah. No, especially when you have like the older ones where they'll turn and they're like, yes, we are. I'm in the running area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
readily available and accessible. And that goes for just about everything because I find it really, really hard when you have something, say for example, you have a wobble stool. And you do have this one particular child in mind who would really, really benefit from that wobble stool. But unless we're able to allow the other children to experience that, put theirself in that friend's shoes, if it, of course, if it's a wheelchair or something specific to the child, but if we're just bringing something into the classroom for universal design, that's not like, um, prescribed, I guess, for lack of a better word, for that child, then it needs to be available to everybody so that everyone can have the experiences. But at the same time, will eventually the children will understand that, hey, like Ruby can play so much more focused when she's using this. Maybe I'll let her have a turn with it today, right? Just because they learn respect for each other
yeah.
when when they're able to share experiences. And I think that's one big thing that universal design does teach is respect for our differences.
Yeah, well, that's certainly a huge part of it, right? It creates an environment for children where they get to experience diversity and get to experience everybody, regardless of their language or their culture or their
Hmm.
ability. We're all in the same environment together. We're all learning in our own ways. We're all communicating in our own ways. It just makes everything very ordinary. So it's the children's, often for many children, it's their first experience with,
Yeah,
learning about different other than themselves,
yeah.
right? Whatever that different is. Someone is learning that, together we all have a place.
Hmm.
Together we all belong in our environment. So, I mean, universal design certainly sets up that environment, right? It's the proactive approach that we kind of prepare so that we're as best prepared we can for all the children, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't have a lot of experience with children who have physical challenges, developmental needs with their physical being. Not a lot. I do have some. Um, so a lot of times my mind does go towards um, mental and emotional and behavioral challenges because it's what I'm more used to and familiar with. But I do think about um, if there are children who have challenges with their physical development and how even having those spaces like gross motor areas, some people are like, oh, but that might be discriminating. It might exclude them. But really, it doesn't because it just
No,
brings us together because the children are able to see how the child can engage. And it just really, really just brings so much joy and camaraderie to your classroom
Yep.
when you're able to include everybody in those experiences.
Yeah. And that's why, looking at principles for universal design, when you look at like the size and space appropriate for use, right?
Yeah.
You're having in that situation, you'd have a nice big, a nice big space where all children come, regardless of if they're in a wheelchair or a walker or, still crawling. You'd have space available for everybody.
Hmm.
And, the flexibility in use, right? So
Yeah.
regardless of how you interact with that environment, it's all available for you there, right?
Yeah.
So whether you're using balls from a wheelchair or from a standing position, everybody can use it in their own way.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's equity again, right? In your
Yeah,
own way and how it works for you.
yeah. And when you have an environment that's set up like an area like that, a gross motor, it's simple, it's predictable. Children know what to expect. They know, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable,
Yeah.
right?
I think I think too, gross motor areas can also benefit the rest of the environment for universal design and space and size because you don't have children running around and taking up that space.
Yeah,
Your
And
quiet
then
spaces
also,
can stay quiet spaces.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And so I think that you need less space in the rest of your classroom because you don't have all of that activity happening there, right? As
yeah,
long as you can move around, then you're you're pretty much good to go. And it's easier to move when you don't have 10 toddlers going in underfoot.
yeah. But it goes to show, like, without even to think about it, when you set up an early childhood classroom, there's so much that we do naturally anyway in our
Yeah.
spaces. That's
Hmm.
part of universal design that, we're not doing it under, like, without active thought of universal design, right?
Yes.
But there's just so much that we do naturally just when we're separating our spaces and we're having those low bookshelves where things are accessible and things are labeled and
Hmm.
it's just all so natural part of what we do that we kind of don't even realize that we're taking some things like that natural, or sorry, the universal design, like is part of it anyway, and we don't even know we're doing it.
And that's one thing that through this process of doing the podcast, like Taylor and I, or at least I know I have I've really been reminded of those things, like
Yeah.
there's so many little aspects of what we do that just like you said come naturally and they make sense.
Yeah,
And we do them and then you realize, "Oh, I'm doing this."
yeah,
Yeah.
Without even putting a lot of thought into it.
no, it's really true.
But I think a big part of that too is making sure that we're doing those observations and analyzing and reflecting on what we're doing so that, again, it makes sense and we can continue to improve our practice and our environments and our program based on what we're learning.
Yeah.
Because a big part of what we do is reflective practice.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's even why, although it's probably not everyone's favorite part of a program, but when we do like our annual reviews, right? When we do our relicensing and our
Hmm.
annual programming, it provides a really nice opportunity to have a whole new review, right? It's the time we realize, oh, we don't have all our labels on our shelves right now. Oh, look, like our daily schedule, the pictures are kind of torn or all those pieces that sometimes through the year you don't get a chance to kind
Yeah.
of look at, but it
Mhm.
keeps it, those are the kind of the aspects of like reflection that keep all those things kind of in the forefront a bit. So we
Yeah.
remember the importance of them, right? When you get
Yeah.
lost in the, 10 million things that you have to do in a day. But it just provides a great opportunity to look back on, what we need to be doing again.
Yeah. And finding what works for you as well. So, as an example, and like anything else, this works for me. It might not work for anybody else on the planet, but I am not a good artist. I do not draw well. My people are stick people. But I have discovered the amazing use of hand-drawn labels because we're allowed to do those here in Newfoundland. And instead of having to try and find a label either in a bin or online, print it out, laminate it, what have you, I just hand draw a label. And there you go. I always have everything labeled because if I switch out toys, it literally takes me like 15, 20 seconds to make a new label and slap it on the bin.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, I looked at one of my partners. I was like, you know what? We got a bit of spare time. Doesn't happen very often, but I said, let's change all the labels to hand-drawn labels just for consistency within the classroom, just so that, it looks universal, it looks the same. And so that's what we did. We just took our time and we had like, your standard labels that never change, your markers or your paper. And we just changed them. We just made hand-drawn labels during quiet time one day, and now everything is hand-drawn, so everything looks uniform and it works because we're never fishing for labels. So, anyway, it might not work for anybody else, but it works for us. And just finding those tweaks that work for your room like that doesn't really have much to do with universal design other than the fact that it does help children to identify where things go and to keep things tidy and safe.
Yeah.
But it's just a part of reflection and observation and seeing what works for your group, for your space,
Yeah.
and in your situation. And
And it is,
that's a big part of universal design.
yeah. And I mean, universal design is, a big part of it is like finding different ways for children to understand and to communicate. If you've got children with English as like a second language or an additional language, or you have pre-readers, like those pictures are certainly an important part
Yeah.
of universal design
Yeah.
because it provides a different way of children receiving information that's important for them in
Hmm.
running their day
Absolutely.
and provides them with
Um,
independence.
yeah. And Ruby, you had mentioned like the annual review. And throughout the year, I'm going more into like inclusive practice now. Um, we we review our action plans within our classrooms. And that's another part of reflection and the importance of keeping documentation and observations. And um, I was wondering if you know very much about what writing an action plan looks like and how ECEs can better support their administration and their inclusion consultants in that process. Like, how can we make it easier?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's again what we probably a lot of people naturally already do because you're still looking at, the strengths of the children, their
Hmm.
challenges, their interests, so all those pieces that we do naturally anyway, but it's kind of just taking it a little bit step further because you're actually writing it in an
Right.
action plan, which achievable goals, and you're looking at the resources that's needed and who's going to be responsible and all those things. But you're right, it's like for me, it's important. You have to get to know the children. So the
Yeah.
very first thing is connection, right? You need to get that connection with the children. You need to get the connection with their families. You need to get the connection with any of the, if they have any other professionals in their circle of care. So it's building all those connections so that together you can really know where that child is developmentally and
Hmm.
what their next steps should be, right? And it's,
Yeah.
I think sometimes, looking at documentation and recordings, we sometimes kind of get caught up on like the negative. So if there was, an aggressive behavior that happened
Right.
or a child did something that would be considered inappropriate, that's the kind of things we often get caught up in recording or like doing your ABCs on
Hmm.
or doing time samples on. But it's equally important, to document those progresses too, and the successes and the next steps, right? And they'll help your action plans too, because as you're looking through your action plans and you're seeing, where they are in each developmental area, where it's physical or emotional or language, by having even, those little tidbits of information that they've achieved this today, or, drawings that they've saved, all those things can be used as kind of evidence and, information for where you go for your next action plan. So
Right.
documenting and recording is huge for that.
I think that's one of the my favorite parts of inclusive work is doing strengths and needs, because you really get to see the progress,
Mm,
right? And it's not, like you said, it's not just sticking to the challenges, the needs. It's actually drawing from those strengths and scaffolding a need from that, right? It's like they can do this, so now let's work on this,
Yep.
right? And I think that's one of my favorite parts of it, because it just really just gives that power to the child, and also gives you a lot of um, information as to how you can help the child as well, instead of looking, oh, this negative thing happened, how can we fix it?
Yeah.
And as ECEs, we don't really think in that way, but that's how society often does think. And so it's a big part of what we do to be able to help society understand, we're here to help this child, to help them thrive, to help them um, find their capabilities, what their level of ability is. We're not trying to fix anything,
No,
right?
it's just is recognizing the successes, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes because you're spending so much time with children, you don't really see the progression or the successes. So when after, 6 months or a year, and you look at the last action plan and you see where the child has come, how far they've grown, where they've, moved on to another developmental area, you're like, oh
yeah,
wow, look at all we've accomplished. Look how much,
Yeah.
this child has
yeah,
learned. And without kind of those strategies in place and that program planning in place, it's easy to overlook it. So you don't realize
yeah.
necessarily, you don't get to celebrate all the wonderful things that we're doing, right?
It's
Because we
true.
overlook it. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Um, I you had mentioned the working with the families and other team members before. And I just want to touch on what the importance of that collaboration is. And I know the strengths and needs, to me, I really fell in love with doing those when I started being part of team meetings. Because you have like three, four, five team members, and you're all sharing all these wonderful positives. And sometimes you see the same things, and sometimes you see different things, and you're just like, oh, I never really thought about that, but this child does do this really well. Maybe we can spark an interest or whatnot. Um, and just, you know, you
Mhm.
just get to work together and find those new goals,
Yeah.
which
And
is
every,
Yeah.
just wonderful. It's a
and
great
everybody
feeling.
sees the child in different environments,
Yeah,
right? So we're not necessarily seeing all the things that they're seeing at home, or at home they may not be seeing everything we're seeing at the center.
yeah,
So, it gives everybody an opportunity to kind of really get to know new parts of the child that they may not have seen themselves before,
mm-hmm,
so
Yeah.
that you can kind of generalize a skill or make it more global, so that it's, happening in more
yeah,
environments for
yeah,
the
Yeah.
child, right? And it provides you an
Absolutely.
opportunity, like to just even to have a simple conversation. Like, I'll just give an example. We had a little one at daycare who was in the middle of toilet training, potty training, and they were coming in their diaper or in their pull-up in the morning, and the staff would take off their pull-up for the day, and then before the end of the day, the staff would put the pull-up back on to go home. And the little child was in the morning struggling to take their pull-up off. It was
Right.
always kind of an upset for the child. They just
Yeah.
didn't want to get involved in that. So finally, one of the staff had a conversation with the parent and said, are you interested in trying? They're doing really good with it here at the center. Would you be interested in trying to get them like from home to center, center home without the pull-up? And the family had said, we were only putting the pull-up on in the parking lot because we thought you wanted them in a pull-up.
See,
So the child was just
communication.
putting
Yeah.
on a pull-up to come into the center, thinking it was what we wanted. And we were putting it on thinking they wanted it to go home. But it was that one
Nobody
piece
wanted
of
it.
No.
communication
Trent.
we
Right.
missed,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So it just goes to show that connection and communication with families,
Hmm.
without even the littlest thing, like without that ongoing kind of check-ins,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much information we miss.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
these
Yeah.
team meetings and these SSPs and things like they are valuable, right? Because
Hmm.
along with, of course, the daily communication with families, but there's so much we can learn to support the child and to better include them in the center and better support all children's, growth and development.
Hmm. Um, I think we only have like one more thing I really want to talk about a little bit, and that's the dynamic within the classroom amongst staff. When on paper you have an inclusion support staff, you have a lead staff, and whatnot. But if you were yourself in the role of an inclusion staff, or even if you were having a conversation with the room staff that has inclusive supports, what what would that dynamic look like to you? Like, what are the roles and expectations and responsibilities? What does that look like?
For me, I think it's certainly a team effort. I think everybody plays a role in supporting all the children. Um, I mean, it is first several reasons. One is that if there's one specific person that's providing inclusive support for a small group of children or a singular child, that, it's easy for all the children to notice that. So it's kind of dividing, I think, that child
Right.
from away from the group. So if there's
Yeah.
one staff that kind of does all the support for that child, the children will know, right? And it certainly
Hmm.
singles them out. And on top of that, too, if there's one staff that's kind of doing all the care, getting to know the child the best, knowing any treatments or any like medical care, those sorts of things. If that staff person's off, then that impacts the care and the programming for that child. But if everybody knows that child and everybody knows, what their care plan is, what their goals are, what their interests are, then it flows, right?
Hmm.
It's more easy for the day to continue for all the children when everybody knows. Um, I mean, I think it would make sense for there to be one person who's designated to kind of um, kind of be the keeper, I guess, of the documentation. So that's the person not necessarily doing it all, but just making sure that, some observations are being completed, that we're making notes of the progress, that we're making notes of any challenges, and somebody who's kind of the lead for when the inclusion consultant comes in or when any other professional comes in or you have a chance to catch them on a phone call or whatever so that it don't get lost. But then it's their job then to share obviously amongst the rest of the team. I mean, it would be fantastic if all team members could go to like the ISSPs or meet with the any professional that came in, but realistically, that's likely not to happen in our field, right? We're lucky if we can
Yeah.
get one person away to
Hmm.
meet. But I mean, you do want all the staff understanding all the children's needs and supporting them. And it also supports the staff too, because if you're the one person who's dealing with the hardest of roles and responsibilities when it comes to inclusion, if you're looking at, behaviors that might stem from, lack of communication or frustration or social emotional needs, or, if you have children who have seizures and you're the one who's constantly providing the medication or any of those sorts of things, um, it could certainly support everybody if that's kind of done collaboratively rather than being left to one staff.
Yeah. I think three big things that have come out of this conversation have been like collaboration, consistency, and reflection,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
none of those are in the universal design principles, but it's what makes them run,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Um, yeah, so I think that the time is almost up. So I don't know how we want to like finish this. I have no idea.
Um,
Well, I will say one thing.
Okay.
I mean, I think we're all, what we're comfortable with, what we know is changing all the time.
Hmm.
People's comfort with supporting different children varies from person to person. But I think if we all, you know, welcome children with an open heart and an open mind and recognize that all children deserve childcare, all children deserve to be a member of our community, of our society, that the things we don't know, we can learn. But as
Yeah.
long as
yeah.
we have a willingness and an interest in supporting all children, the rest will come. We can make mistakes, but
Hmm.
we have a team, we have administrators, we have inclusion consultants, we have a whole team of people to support us as long as we have the willingness, right?
Absolutely.
To
Very
support
much
all
so.
children.
Yeah. And we're human and everyone makes mistakes. And as
Yep,
long as we learn from the mistakes, like we take them and we learn from them, then
yep,
everything else will fall into place.
yep.
Yeah.
And all families can be supported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yep.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us,
Yes.
Ruby.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much. All right. Bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay. Well, yeah, honestly, I think Ruby did a really good job summarizing
Yeah,
all of that.
definitely. And she she drew in the families, which is
Yes,
one thing that we hadn't really touched on, but I am so glad that she did because we are here for the families.
that and like they're such an integral part of the team.
Yep.
They're the most important part of the team,
Mm-hmm.
really. Um for us to connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I I don't know, I feel that inclusive practice, just the idea of everyone coming together and everything being brought together into like one cohesive package with all the different pieces
Mhm.
is like the perfect topic for us to end
And
this
this journey.
journey. Yeah. Learned so much, so much reflective practice, and met so many people and so many different viewpoints that have strengthened my practice.
I think so as well.
Yeah,
For
and,
myself.
and have built me into a more aware ACE.
Yeah, I was just thinking like I feel
Yeah.
like it makes me more intentional
Yeah.
because even though a lot of the things I was doing before naturally,
It's just like Ruby had said, right?
yeah,
We're
it's just
doing it without
realizing,
realizing.
yeah, and so just
Yeah.
now being able to put the intention behind it
Yeah.
is has made a difference,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful opportunity. Um it's the last episode.
Yes. So
But
thank you. Oh,
you never know.
you never know.
Someone else might continue the journey, or maybe we'll pick up where we left off in the future.
Maybe.
Because nobody ever knows what the future holds.
Nope.
Anyway, thank
Thank you
you everybody
so
for joining
much.
us.
It's been great.
It has.
Bye.
Bye.